CEO, and they're both engineers, and they're working in a battery lab at Stanford University. They're both engineers, mechanical engineers, and working with lithium-ion cobalt. And basically the idea was, they had this idea that rather than building a car battery, an electric car with a specific type of battery, the best thing to do, because the market had been vetted already, and because the economies of scale were already in place, and because if you could control temperatures correctly, it would allow you to basically just take a laptop battery, and rather than one big battery, you take thousands of very small batteries in series and in parallel, and you make sure that you have a liquid cooling system that allows you to kind of modulate those heat thresholds, which is really the key with a lot of these cells. And as long as the energy density is high enough, and it continues to get better and better every year, then you can scale this up to a place that's functionally big enough to power a vehicle, 240 plus miles. So we came out with the Roadster, a 245 mile range, and we use lithium-ion cobalt cell, and cobalt's the key because it has no memory effect, which allows you to kind of top it off every night, which is the way you use a car. And so that's where it started, with this little hand-built prototype Tesla Roadster, and we found that by putting in a three-phase AC induction electric motor, we could feed enough amperage to it to make it about as fast as a Ferrari. And so that was really the idea behind the Roadster, was to prove the concept. And we wanted to kind of disprove a few basic misconceptions about electric vehicles in the marketplace. One was that they look ugly. Two were that they're slow. Three was that they don't have any range. And so we built a really fast, really sporty-looking, sexy electric car with 245 miles of range. And the goal was to get to the point where nobody could say that by their own nature electric cars are slow and ugly and have no range. It's a choice of the engineering to build them a particular way. And here's one example of the fact that those truths are no longer true in the market. And so that was something that we did. We didn't have a factory. We didn't really have any buying power. So we worked with Lotus over in England. They basically allowed us to pick and pull from their chassis and parts components. We would lay our own battery pack on top of their chassis, send it back over here. Right in that back area is where we used to build every single Roadster by hand. 100% carbon fiber body, all hand built. Limited run of about 2,400 vehicles over about 4 years, and we sold them out completely. Now the only ones that you see are certified pre-owned vehicles that are being traded back in for the next car, which is Model S. And Model S really represents what Tesla will be going forward. The big difference between these two cars is mass production. We purchased NUMMI, which is going to allow us to build as many cars as we need to for the next probably 10 years of growth. And that was about a $2 billion asset that we got our hands on for $43 million. So for us, that was a huge leap forward to be able to have the capacity to scale up. You can see that the price point now started at $109 with the Roadster, now starts in the mid-50s in the Model S. And so that's a direct effect of the economy of scale we put into place. But we also were in a position to now build our own car from the ground up. And so what we did is we got rid of the Lotus chassis. We built our own chassis that was essentially designed specifically to house a battery. And that's really the first time that's ever been done. So we built the powertrain, and then we wrapped the car around it, which is kind of the opposite of what you see elsewhere when you look at cars like, say, the Nissan Leaf. That's a Nissan Versa, hollowed out, backwards compatible electric car. And that means that there are some redundancies or inefficiencies that existed because it was designed for a different type of power plant. And when we do this, we make sure that there are engineering elements that are specific to electric cars or specific to cars in general. For instance, when you put the battery in the floor, you move the weight from the polar axes into the center of the vehicle, you move it from high to low, and you center it in the car. You also increase the torsional rigidity. So not only did we find a great enclosure for the battery that gives us the storage space of an SUV, but we also made this car handle better than any other four-door sedan at this curb weight, period. And so those were some of the things. And then we had the ability now to build our own operating system inside the car, which is pretty unique that you'll see. But we're moving into that range now where you're going to see volume increase exponentially, year over year, a couple years over a couple years as we move from model to model. We're going to start layering on volume instead of replacing volume, which is, the Roadster will be the only Tesla ever built that's a limited run car. I mean, we're now moving into the mass markets, and so the goal is similar to what you see, from a business side, It's similar to what you see at Apple, where the consumers, if you can build a quality, high-end luxury product, you can always increase your volume and move down in price point to make it more applicable. But the challenge really then becomes, if you're going to start with an entry-level product, how do you build a luxury brand around that? And that's a direction that's almost impossible to move towards. I mean, you've seen companies like Hyundai trying to do their like Mercedes killer car. It's a huge challenge because that first association sticks. And so for us, we wanted to, it made all the sense in the world to start with luxury cars. As volume goes up, it makes sense to move down in price point, but it also gives us the ability to build the brand the right way. Build it on quality, build it on technology and precision. And so we will get to the point, and the inevitable question is always, okay, when do you have a car that everybody can afford? And we will. And the fact of the matter is that we could probably build it now, but we need to produce and sell hundreds of thousands a year based on those margin points. We don't have the capacity for it yet. So it's not an engineering challenge, it's a production challenge. And that's a production challenge that will only happen over time. You just can't jump to the end. And so we're rolling our volume up, week over week, and you've seen it where, in July we were producing a couple of cars a day. In December, which is only a few months later, we were up at the point where we were doing about 100 cars a day, and that would put us well beyond even our goal of 20,000 units for this year, of which we've already sold close to 18 or 19,000. So the demand curve is there, and for us really the next step is just getting the efficiencies in the production process up to scale, and we're concurrently developing the SUV and all sorts of other. I mean, we're going to have a full line. We're going to have a $30,000 to $35,000 compact sedan in the next probably 5 to 6 years. And if you look at the cost of ownership and the cost of maintenance and the cost of fuel associated with our cars relative to a normal car, you can easily compare that $30K car to a true entry-level, $15,000 entry-level vehicle of any kind. So that's when we hit that point where anybody can, theoretically afford it. And as we grow, we're building out the infrastructure proprietarily as well, because these batteries are so big and powerful. We can do things that a lot of other manufacturers can't. Superchargers is a really good example of these 440-volt DC charging stations. And I think that the argument of kind of open source versus proprietary gets a little muddled, but at the end of the day, we do things that are so far beyond the capabilities of other car companies that we don't really have a choice in the matter a lot of time. It's proprietary because of the way it's engineered, not because of our business sense around it. And so you're going to see these superchargers popping up all over the country. We've got plans to open 20 new retail stores over the next year. And you're not going to really see any advertisements because the store locations, and this one's a little bit distinct because this is more of a showroom. But the one down in San Jose is a good example of the fact that that's the way we're going to build the brand. We're not going to do dealerships. We're not going to outsource or license any technology. We're very vertically oriented, even on the production side. We do our own body panels in-house, which is exceedingly rare. We do all of our own extrusions and castings and things like that. And yes, there's more upfront capital required, but once we get those processes in-house, our efficiencies come into place, and we're not relying on outside sources. And that's always been one of the MOs of this company, is to, if you can do it yourself, then do it yourself. You'll do it better that way. You'll have more control over the process. And it's the same with our store environment as well. So that's kind of the overview.
Great.
Do you guys have any questions or anything?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you can answer this question or not, but I assume that they have a patent on the battery itself, right?
Yeah.
When the found the company. Do you know why he or she didn't just do the licensing? Because to build a new brand is kind of hard, especially the auto industry is very competitive, and if they just do licensing, and every cars company, every auto companies in the world, not only in US, not only GM or Ford, like Honda, Toyota, or Korea brand like Kia, or you can sell to every brand, and if they all use your battery, it's going to be like huge profit.
It's actually a good point. I mean, we don't license the brand itself, meaning that we won't let you build a Tesla store and license that, but we do actually sell the technology in the battery. We have wholesale battery sale agreements with both Toyota and Daimler Mercedes. And you're going to find Tesla batteries in the RAV4 electric that's coming out this year. You're going to find them in the Mercedes A-Class that's being sold in Europe, and the Smart Car. And they have a Freightliner fleet that's using some of our technology. And so yes, we are open to the notion of selling the battery technology. It's the brand that we really kind of hold close, because it's a lot like kind of Intel, right? I mean, you know, they can source their technology, they can power the other machines, but when it's just the battery, there's no risk of exposing the brand to any negative ideas. Whereas when you go into a car dealership, anybody that's bought a car, you know that you leave with some weird feelings about it, right? Because the guys are very hawkish and they're kind of sleazy and they want to haggle and they want to negotiate. And it's not about protecting that product or selling it the right way. It's about getting your money and getting you out the door. What do I have to do to get you into a car today type of thing. And so that's something that we felt was archaic and negative in terms of the whole customer experience and the way that the customer feels and is treated in that realm. So that was one of the things that we wanted to try and rewrite. And you can see we've gotten some pushback from it from the dealer unions, because they've had this business model in place for a long, long time. They've got a lot invested in this model. And we're coming in and saying, you know, we think that the better way to do this is for the manufacturer to sell directly and to get rid of all these sales guys, these middlemen basically, that are just creating arbitrage. They're not adding any value. You know, we want to cut that whole piece of the pie out. And so that's a threat to them. It's something that hasn't been done in a long time. You know, obviously they have, the legitimate argument that they have is that, you know, you don't want to undercut an existing, somebody that you've already sourced to, you don't want to come in and be able to undercut them as a manufacturer, and that's valid, but because we don't source in the first place, you know, we're not going in to undercut anybody, and which is why the first lawsuit that was raised in Massachusetts was just thrown out. But yes, I mean, we definitely distinguish between the technology and the brand, and with the brand, we don't really license that at all, but with the technology, we're totally open to putting that in the marketplace. I mean, our ultimate goal is to increase adoption of electric cars. It's not necessarily that we want to do it at the cost of these other manufacturers or just us alone. We want to push that forward however we can. So
I mean, like in the beginning,
is that it opens the door for a company that says, you know what, I don't even want this technology out there, so I'm going to buy it, I'm going to lock it up, right? Which has happened a lot in the auto industry before. You know, there are movies, Who Killed the Electric Car? Electric cars have been out there before, but the business model behind them was a huge threat to the place where you normally find margin, which is maintenance and dealership models and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure that somebody couldn't just buy it and sit on it. And so by building Tesla, you show people that it's out there, and you get to the point where you're comfortable sourcing the technology, knowing that if they decided to make it disappear, people would ask questions. People wouldn't allow that to happen so easily. And so, and part of it too, I think, is that if you look at if you look at Elon Musk as an individual, you know, he intends to leave a legacy behind. It's not necessarily about the easiest businesses that make the most money. It's about these big challenges that we face as a society and what he's going to do to have an impact on them. And I think that, you know, building Tesla was one of those things that he saw as really important thing to leave behind, and he wanted to really leave his mark on the auto industry, and this was how he was going to do it.
Is he still involved in the company? Yeah.
He's the CEO.
Oh, he is. Mm-hmm. Okay. So your go-to-market strategy, and this is different in that it's a walk-in showroom, but most everywhere else you go to a major shopping center. So when we were in Santa Monica, did any of you go to the Promenade store?
We saw that,
yeah.
And we have one in Arizona.
In the fashion mall, right? All right. So that's, I mean, that's a very genius way to expose the product, and yet where do you perform service then?
So we basically detach service from sales. Mm-hmm. In some cases, we have it attached, just like in this location. Most of the time, you're going to find that. So service is a bit different. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that there really isn't very much.
Right.
I mean, we do a checkup, you know, about once a year, every 12,500 miles. Beyond that, it's just tires and, you know, little things that we can do, wireless remote diagnostics, and we can do mobile service where we come to you. And so rather than needing, you know, this big service station with, you know, a bunch of lifts and machinery, really to service maybe an entire state, we may need a couple of guys with one or two jacks in an industrial location that's low rent and easy for us to justify. And most of the time, they're going to be going on doing house calls in their truck with their toolkits and their computers. And so they just need a hub. They need somewhere where they can plug their computer in at the end of the day, and maybe one lift that they can use. So in some cases, we have spillover that we use that guy right over there, that lift. And we know him, and when he's not using it, we can bring a car down there and pull it up. But the thing is that you don't need to change oil or swap a spark plug or a timing belt or a fan belt. And so most of what we do is preventative care maintenance, where we just look at your car, we check it up, we give it like a big CAT scan. We do rotation and alignment once a year, but that's the only physical work that's usually required other than topping off windshield wiper fluid. And so that's kind of the model that we're going to be, and it's the way we take orders is clever too, because we take your deposit, we know where the car is going to go maybe 6 to 9 months before we deliver that car. And so we have all the empirical data before those cars even ship out where they're going to live. And we can start just spotting up these service centers where the density is high enough. And we have this paradigm where we want, 85% of our owners within 50 miles of a service station. And we can make that true because we know exactly where they're clustered. And so that's going to be a big expansion for us in the next years, adding, maybe 100 service centers. So it's going to be a significant number as we deliver 20,000 cars. We're going to need to bump that up.
How about the accident then? If they have crash, or how can they fix the car?
Well, we build almost every piece of the car in Fremont. And so, depending on the severity of the accident, if you're talking about, I need a new door panel, well, you don't have to wait for that to come from the Midwest or from Mexico or even from China like you normally do. We're going to run that process right over in Fremont and ship that panel, either deliver it, ship it to our service center where they're going to install it there, or come to you and install it at your home, or it's going to just go to one of, at some point we may start kind of certifying mechanics and auto shops that we know that we can vet and allowing them to do some on-site labor for things like that. But it's the standard process. You go through the insurance company either way for something like that, and we'll process those parts just like they would in a normal vehicle and figure out how to get them fixed.
Sometimes if you have kind of, how would you say, strong accident, so your car maybe need to, stretch it out or something like that. It's not just change the parts.
Well, generally speaking,
infrastructure in every state or every city to fix for them.
I think that the criteria usually is that, and this is not specific to us or to electric cars or anything, but the criteria usually is that if there's chassis damage, meaning structural damage to the chassis itself, that car, as per your insurance company, is going to be branded as a totaled vehicle with a salvage title, meaning that the warranty is then gone and you're going to basically scrap it. Your best option then is to get a new car because you've undermined the structural integrity of the entire product, and no matter how well you repair it, it'll never be fully structurally sound again. So for the stuff that is not that significant, that stuff we can handle a la carte. For the times when you do get in that accident where the wheel well goes in and that chassis enclosure is bent or there's damage to the battery, it'll happen the same way it would on a normal car, where they say, listen, this is a salvage, we're going to pay you basically for the car, go get a new one. Yeah.
What's the usage life of the battery system?
So it really, as with any product, especially a battery-powered product, it comes down to lifestyle and how well you take care of it. There are certain things you can do to extend it. There are certain things that are out of your control, like the ambient conditions in which you live. We usually, our warranty on the battery is about 8 years, anywhere between 100 and unlimited mileage, depending on the battery pack size. The big battery is 8 years unlimited mileage. We've seen, what you will see on the battery is an annual linear degradation. It's based on time and mileage, and in that, you'll see for the first 7 or 8 years anywhere between a 0 to 5 to 6% degradation annually. Meaning that if you live in California and you charge it consistently, you could see almost no degradation. We have customers that have almost no degradation at all over 4 or 5 years. People that live in, the north of the Arctic Circle and they're exposed to extreme cold temperatures or extreme humidity, maybe in Hong Kong or something like that, you're going to see higher degradation effect. But at a certain point, usually when the battery gets to that critical tipping point of about 30% overall degradation, then you see a bit of an exponential, kind of a hyperbola-shaped drop-off curve. And the goal is to catch it before that. You can run it all the way up to that cliff, but there's a point at which you just want to get a new battery altogether. And so that's something that we check on when we do your annual checkup. We're checking to see how close to that cliff you are so we can catch that if we need to. But usually, I mean, the funny thing is that when you talk about it from a functional perspective, 8 years in a luxury sedan is extremely rare in the marketplace, to keep a luxury sedan 8 years. And so, that's something we want to change, but it's a question that I think won't necessarily be all that applicable from a buying perspective to a lot of people, given that we're already past that point where it's more than you need, and it'll only get better.
But with your the cell structure of the battery, can't you identify the sectors that
Absolutely.
are bad and just go in and replace the little guys?
Yeah, I
rather than
mean,
the whole
we
thing?
can. There are probably about 7,000 individual lithium-ion cobalt cells. We've got the cells configured in series and in parallel, so we have them in sheets and then we have them in bricks. At the individual cell level, replacing a cell or a handful or even 100 really is not going to have much of an effect, because the battery is designed to really kind of even itself off as much as it can at all times, so it doesn't have these disparities. We have, in some cases, there are instances where you replace a whole brick, which is like an eighth of the, or a tenth or something. But it needs to be significant enough where it warrants basically dropping the entire chassis out the bottom of the car. And it's redundant enough where loss of a few cells is not something that you will notice at all as an owner. We may notice it when we run that system, that algorithm that checks it, but it's not going to be, you won't notice any change in range or performance because it's designed to have some redundancies there. But if there are defects, not related to degradation, if there's a defective part, that's something where at either the cell level or the brick or the sheet, we can go in and replace it at any of those modular levels that we need to.
Sorry if I have any questions. So interesting. How much to change the battery, like for the whole thing? If, like for example, if I just try to think further, if you have owned the car, and normally people who buy the car, they have to think about when they sell the car as well, right? So when you are going to sell, if they have to change the battery, so it's going to be something that affect the price.
Exactly.
So how much does it cost to change the whole battery?
So it's an interesting question. I mean, the easy answer is that this is going to be a market-driven price point. I mean, the cost of lithium-ion cobalt cells will be what it is in 8 years. We have some effect on that through our R&D, but we're a small piece of, the companies that are developing cell phone batteries and that kind of stuff have much higher, production cycles and stuff. So they're going to be the drivers of all this. But at the end of the day, we wanted to give the customer an opportunity to basically hedge against that market price that they expect to occur. And we have these things called the battery replacement agreements. And before we get into pricing, the proper context is that in lieu of buying a new car, I get a new battery. A lot of people think of it like a part replacement, like I just maintain my engine. It's not like that. This would effectively be like trading your car in and buying a whole new car, because what you're getting is a fresh powertrain with all new technology. So it's not an insignificant price point. It's not an incremental cost. It's a full switching cost. But we have these battery replacement agreements now where for the small, middle, or large battery, you can prepay at the time you take delivery of your original car $8,000, $10,000, or $12,000 to purchase that battery that we will then hold for you for 7 years, or for 8 years. And it's prorated both ways. So if you need it before 8 years, you'll pay an extra $1,000 every year. If your original battery lasts longer than 8 years and you purchase the replacement agreement, we'll give you $1,000 back every year after 8 years that you don't use that battery. But basically, this is like it's like an insurance policy. It's like saying, listen, depending on how optimistic or pessimistic I am about the market price that I'll see in 8 years, I have an opportunity to lock this price in right now if I think that price is reasonable. And so, I think that it's pretty fair because, we as Tesla, we don't want to take a huge loss on this. So we've done our due diligence, and these prices are pretty accurate as far as we can tell, which means that the risk is not all that great. I mean, you lose whatever interest you would have made on that 8K, but you get the peace of mind. And if you don't get it, you don't need to, because here we are, we're a publicly traded company banking heavily on this price point anyway. So odds are it'll be somewhere at least reasonably close to that point. Right now, it's significantly more. But we've seen, these pretty aggressive efficiency improvements in the batteries, coupled with price depreciation as the volumes go up over the past maybe 10 years since lithium ion's been out. So we have enough empirical data to kind of see where that curve is headed.
There's probably already somebody betting in the derivatives market on what those costs.
I'm sure there will be. Yeah.
There's a secondary market in Tesla. And you also have Boeing on your, trying to drive, as of today, wanting to get batteries really figured out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of those things where you can see that, lithium ion's been around for so long, but when you make it so much more powerful and you apply it to new products, it's an entirely different engineering challenge in some cases. Even companies that spend billions of dollars testing empirically, they have faults. And so, it's one of those things where as the batteries improve, consumer confidence in them will improve. But a lot of the people that are buying Teslas now understand that they're buying into being a part of that cycle. They want to be the ones that, 15 years later, they can look back and say actually played a role in driving these cars and finding out what can go wrong and reporting that back to this company. And that's one of the reasons that we create this direct conduit from manufacturer to consumer, is so that development feedback cycle on the engineering side can be much more direct. If you can imagine trying to tell a dealership you've had a technical issue on your car, what are the odds that gets up to the highest levels of Toyota itself or to BMW? It won't. Here it will. And so you become kind of a part of this company where you actually have a direct effect on the production cycle of the car moving forward, which is a very cool thing for a lot of guys.
Yeah.
So I have a question about like the charging systems and the batteries and kind of how that all plays into an effect. When a customer comes in, they buy it, what do they need to do to charge the car? And then also if they want to actually like take it on a road trip that's more than 245 miles or whatever the base was, how do they go about doing that, and what's the downtime for charging?
Yeah. So actually Model S now has up to 300-mile battery, so you can see the battery efficiency improving since Roadster. But one of the unique things about Tesla is that we tend to make our decisions differently than a lot of big companies. Most companies, it really boils down to dollars and cents, and you can't blame them for that because that's why they exist as a firm. For us, we have a more holistic approach to things. I mean, we really feel like we're doing this on behalf of humanity. And so there's some humanist element to our corporate decisions. One of them was to, rather than building a proprietary charging interface off board the car that would force you to then buy a $1,500 charger, install it in your wall. I mean, that unit is a huge profit center, right? Because it's an accessory officially, and it's very expensive relative to what's inside it. We chose to not do that. We chose to build that into the car and give it to you as an owner so that you can plug your car into any outlet in the world. And it means that we lose that much margin on every vehicle unless somebody wants our high-powered connector, which we tend to talk people out of because it's overkill. It's an 80 amp system. So you can plug the car into anything. We tend to recommend a normal dryer outlet, a washer dryer wall outlet, 220 volt, which is perfect. That'll charge you up 30 miles per hour overnight, and it's actually about 33% faster charge than the high-powered Nissan Leaf charger system that costs $1,500. This outlet costs you $100 to install. So that's one of the easy things, is that you don't need a charging system. Your car's a charger. You just need a connector to electrons. And even 110 volt, the outlet you plug your phone into, can charge this car. charges slower, but it works. When you're going on road trips, you know, the real solution is the superchargers that we're installing, which are DC 440 volt, and those charge at a rate of 5 miles a minute, or about 300 miles in an hour. So it means that you get a good, 5 hours of drive time for every hour of charge required, and that's pretty good on a road trip. I mean, you go 5 hours, you need a meal, or a bathroom break, or a coffee, and if you can get 150 miles in 30 minutes, that means that you can do a 450-mile trip with just a half-hour rest stop. And we've installed these first in California. We've got 6 of them here. There's one in Folsom, so you can go to Tahoe. There are about 4 between here and LA, and there's one between LA and Las Vegas and Barstow. And then we just installed 2 on the East Coast, but we're going to blanket the entire country in these so that there's overlap, meaning that you can get from one to any number of other ones without your battery running out. And that's going to allow you to go all over the contiguous United States. Beyond that, when you talk about road trips, you really have to get specific. For instance, are you trying to, what's the purpose of your road trip? To get from A to B quickest with the lowest costs? You get to a critical point where it's actually cheaper to, if you've got it's cheaper to fly rather than drive your Suburban that gets 8 miles a gallon across the entire country, and it gets you there in a day instead of 2 weeks, right? So that's a no-brainer. If you're talking about these kind of intermediate road trips where you're going to say maybe here to all the way up to Seattle, those are the types of ones that superchargers are going to be able to handle in the next few years, but are relatively difficult now. Shorter road trips where you're going from place to place, those are really easy because the idea is when you can plug in anywhere. You got 300 miles to start with. Even here to LA, you need to find 100 miles somewhere, basically. And there are, probably about 300-400 charging stations in addition to public outlets that you can use. And so what I tell a lot of people is that if you're really going to go on a road trip, the reason that you're going on a road trip instead of hopping a flight is to kind of enjoy yourself a little bit more. So all you do is that in addition to planning your hotels, you just plan a couple of stops for, a nice meal somewhere in some city you're passing through that has a nice charger. You just do a little bit of logistical due diligence up front. And it becomes really easy because once you've done it a few times, you realize it's not anything that's going to cause any serious anxiety.
Are you creating your own charging system locations, or are you partnering with gas stations like Shell and Exxon and all that?
Well, we don't want them at gas stations because there's nothing to do at a gas station.
Yeah.
If you need to kill a half an hour, you want to be at an outlet mall or at a restaurant. We have them at Harris Ranch, which is a huge rest stop with shopping and food. We put them near outlet malls, we put them near airports, we put them near movie theaters. So if you need to kill an hour, you have plenty to do. And that's really an interesting segue into the open market approach to charging installation, because it gives these companies a chance to experience the fact that when you put a charger in, you drive traffic at your location. And so the next step is what we've seen a lot in Napa. All the wineries and vineyards, they put chargers, free chargers, high-powered ones. They'll pay a few grand to install them on their own. But what they get is an extra 2 or 3 customers a day coming there just because, hey, there are 10 vineyards and all have great wine, but only one's got a charger. Where am I going if I have a Tesla? That's easy. And if I can sell you a box of wine there, and give you $4 of electricity in exchange for $200 in wine, I then justify this like I justify ad spend. And so we're trying to make sure that we put these in places where they can see the benefit of it, and then hopefully that'll kind of trickle out to the other businesses where we won't have to continue funding a lot of this because they'll begin funding themselves. And that's something that's people are just catching on to now, but a lot of restaurants and a lot of hotels are finding that it's more cost effective than running an ad in the newspaper to put a high-powered connector in and put your location into 5 different charge databases with a big pin on your location that says come here for free charge.
Well, you have an automatic demographic filter.
Absolutely.
By doing that, so that'd be smart.
Come back to the entrepreneur real question. In the entrepreneur's perspective, when you start the business and you try to introduce the Tesla brand, which is a fully electric car, which is not really normal in the market, right? Because normally it's kind of hybrid or something like that. And as you mentioned in the beginning, there are a lot of kind of concerns from the people in the world. So with those challenges, what's the strategy at that time to introduce that and try to kind of overcome the challenge? And do you have any marketing tactics that you really did at that time and is very successful to change people's mind?
Well, I think that from day one, we've realized that people don't, when normal cars have been the same for like 100 years. And every one of us is so entrenched in normal cars that somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, there's something better out there. It's better in every way. You just aren't ready to hear it, right? Because why now? Why not sooner? Why don't I know about this? All this stuff. And there's a lot of vested interest in maintaining the status quo. Obviously, you've got the oil and gas lobbies and all that stuff, right? What we've found since day one is that the only real way to convince someone that an electric car is better is to give them the keys to it and let them drive it. Once you feel what this does, and you start realizing that it is just like my car in every way, but it's better in a lot of these other ways. And I drive it around, and I come back, and there's still 280 miles on the car, and I wake up to it in the morning, and it's fully charged, and I don't have to worry about going and plugging it in. I mean, these are the types of things that we can talk all we want in the store, but until your neighbor has one and they let you see it, or until you come in for a test drive, or until you see it on the road, and you try and take a picture, but it accelerates so fast that you can't. Those are the things that really make the difference, and it's things like this. We've been talking to auto review sites for years and years about, hey, we're building this car. It's going to blow your socks off. It's going to make the Porsche and the BMWs that you guys give Car of the Year to every year. It's going to make them look like a joke. Nobody's going to believe that, because there's billions of dollars invested in these, in these cylinders and these engines and the turbochargers and these incremental efficiency improvements every year. For us to come along and just do what they've done, but do it so much better, it's unprecedented. But Motor Trend has been around 65 years, and they've never had a unanimous decision for Car of the Year until this year, when our car won it. And the same is true when we give the cars to people. That's when it happens. I mean, you can go back in time and look at auto review websites writing articles about Tesla as a company and what they expect from the car, and they can come into the store and talk and interview with our PR team and write articles about it, and then we give them the car for a weekend and they write another article, and it's totally different. I mean, it's night and day, because at the end of that drive, they just have to say, this is, I mean, I'm blown away, I'm impressed. There's nothing else like this.
It's crazy fast.
It is.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous car. I mean, the interface in the center, the way that it moves, the way it handles the acceleration, the fact that there are dozens instead of thousands of moving parts. I mean, all these things, and that's what we're trying to do here, is just get as many people as we can into the driver's seat. So that, and the key to this really is that it's viral. I mean, once you've driven a Tesla, you can't just go home. You have to tell the next person you see, go drive a Tesla, because I want to talk about it with you. I want someone that has felt it too, that I can sit there and be like, remember when it did this, right? It's hard to keep it in because it's so exciting. And so that's big, is that we create evangelists. We get people in the car, we get them the experience, and then they become evangelists that go out there and bring others in. And I can't tell you how often we sell a car to someone, they pick it up, they come back the next day, they've got their neighbor.
Right.
Their neighbor buys a car. He comes back the next day, he brings his grandpa buys a car. His grandpa goes back to Germany. We get a call from Germany the next day from his friend who car collects with him in Germany, saying, I want one for Germany. I mean, it's really funny, and it's really cool how exciting it is for people, to share this type of thing with other people.
So we're not going to see a Tesla Super Bowl ad?
Probably not anytime soon.
Okay.
Definitely
Yeah.
not for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, stores are the focus.
Start. It's like you just put the commercial or like the kind of infomercial.
Not at all.
Like
I mean,
this
we
kind of
would
look.
do, the only advertising we've ever really done has been co-branding, where we say, like NVIDIA they do the Tegra chip for our user interface, in a car, and they go to CES every year they have a booth with their Tegra 3 chip. We'll go and be there with them, right? So we're going to pull in folks to their booth, and we're going to leverage, the investment they've already made in that. But we try and play it pretty guerrilla style, kind of no cash in hand. If somebody wants us to sponsor something, we'll offer to just be there. We'll be there with a product, and that'll give you some incremental advantage. But we don't tend to pay for ads or billboards or anything like that. When Google has a company party and they want us to come, we'll come. It's things like that we try and do, just kind of viral co-branding, really ground level stuff in each market, car shows and stuff like that. And we obviously get in touch with the guys that review cars and get Jay Leno, let him borrow it for a couple of nights so he can do his Jay's Garage, review and stuff like that. But very non-traditional forms of advertising. I think we ran one ad on Bloomberg in 2009 for like 2 months, and that was the only one I've ever seen.